welcome everyone that is joining, and there's new people kind of coming on. I am so happy to be doing my first Insta Live with my friend Coode. And for those of you who are new to Actua, okay, this is also going to be a half hour of comedic relief, which we all need right now. As much as we need screens, we need humor. For those of you new to Actua is a national organization that delivers programs through our network of amazing members across the country. Hopefully some of them are going to be joining this Insta Live with us today. But those network members are out in communities, normally delivering face-to-face programs to youth that build confidence and skills in science, technology, engineering, and math. And as everyone right now, we're all doing a pivot. Those of us who deliver face-to-face programs are now moving more into doing remote delivery programs and online delivery programs. And Actua has done that as well with our network members. So one of the things that, regardless of being home, before COVID and during COVID, that we talk a lot about is kids being online, and not only being online, but what they're doing online and how to make screen time more productive, how to make sure that we're using screens in positive ways that are additive and positive for kids. So one of the important aspects of that is how to keep them safe online. And we know as an organization going across the country and working with kids that is a piece that often is getting forgotten, or it gets mentioned and then we kind of all go back to our regular way of doing things. So that's why we wanted to bring you in today, Kat, to talk about online safety, and especially in these times of our kids being a little bit more on screens. So Kat is the founder of Binary Tattoo and an expert in data privacy. And I'm going to get you to talk a little bit more about your work first, and then we'll dive into some tips for parents and teachers. I know a lot of them are watching. So first, Kat and I have known each other. We've had the pleasure of being on different panels and at different conferences together. So happy that you're here. Start by telling us about Binary Tattoo.
Thank you. All right, great. So I come from a technical background. I worked at BlackBerry for a really long time doing software development and software architecture. And as a mom myself, when I left BlackBerry, I thought, thank goodness I'm raising my kids in this digital generation and I actually understand what they're doing online. And then I started reading some of the code behind the social networks that they're using, like Facebook and the stuff that happened with Cambridge Analytica. But this was 7 years ago, before a lot of that was public. And I came to the realization that people didn't know where their data was going online. And we really had no idea what kind of information we were putting out there, who it was being shared with. And so I started my own company, which is Binary Tattoo. So binary for the language of all things digital, and tattoo, of course, for the permanence of everything we're sticking on the internet. And so when I originally started my company, my kids were quite little. And so my whole plan was to educate parents and kids and schools about internet safety and children. And then as it's evolved over the years, it's everyone's concern. Data privacy is an everyone problem, not just a parent-kid problem. And so I've evolved to do a lot of cybersecurity education for companies. And I now have a certification in data privacy law. So I know exactly what we should be doing, even when we're not doing it. And so that's where a lot of I've evolved from. But I always come back to kids because, again, as a parent, I get it. And it's something we need to stay on top of.
And the thing is that every time I've heard you talk, and every time I talk about this too, as someone who gets asked this a lot, we're talking about keeping kids safe online, but inevitably every single time the adults are the ones that are also learning about keeping themselves safe online, right? So it's things that we need to be aware of for our kids, but the reality is that a lot of us as adults and teachers and people who are, not kids, is that we also need refreshers and information on how to do this, because a lot of us are making mistakes as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the fact that more kids are all kids are at home right now and they're spending more time on devices, whether that's because parents are working and they need the extra time, or because of the online learning that's happening via the schools. So what are some of the biggest things that parents need to be aware of with regard to safety at home, things that they need to remind themselves and their kids about, whether that is around, you know, Wi-Fi usage or safety of routers or sharing devices, which we're all passing devices back and forth. So tell us what's top of mind for you.
For sure. And the first thing to acknowledge, of course, like you said, every single household is different. We have households that don't even have Wi-Fi access. We have households where everyone has their own device. So understanding first that we're not going to have a universal thing that just works for everyone. And I think the school boards too have also acknowledged that in what they're passing out. The first thing you want to do is make your home a safe place to be online. And if you don't have Wi-Fi and you're going to these parking lots where they're coming in with free Wi-Fi, you want to make sure that you're not sending private information over free Wi-Fi ever. I mean, even if you're just going to a Starbucks, which we're not right now, but if you were, you want to make sure you're not sending financial information, passwords, anything like that over that free Wi-Fi. So if you do have Wi-Fi at home, the first thing you want to do is password protect your Wi-Fi. It should not be open for anyone else to come. Very sadly, we are seeing an increase of cybersecurity incidents right now, up to 700% because of COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, because people are home, because the cybersecurity from home isn't as good, because they're preying on people's fear and insecurity. And so, yeah, we're seeing a 700% rise in cybersecurity incidents. So having an open Wi-Fi is leaving your door open for criminals. And we want to lock that down with a password. And the other thing with your router is just to run the updates. Same thing with your devices. I hear that a lot because I know what happens is they send an email out and they'll say, hey, cool new feature. It happens with my phone all the time. New emojis. Right. And I'm like, do I want new emojis? I don't know. But it's just a mask for the security holes that they're plugging up. Because if they came out and said security holes, everyone would be like, oh my God, iPhone has security holes. Yeah. So it's any update you can get a hold of is going to plug security holes in all of the hardware that you're using. And then again, password protecting that Wi-Fi is really key at home.
That is such a good point. And then what about sharing devices? Is there anything that we need to know about that?
The best thing you can do, and again, it all depends on the hardware you have, but if you can split accounts, we're talking parents today, but clearly a lot of parents are working from home, and there's a lot of issues too around confidential information. That's corporate information. That information shouldn't be accessible to your kids either. And you want to just separate those accounts. So especially if your kids are in a Google for School account, if you can create them their own account on their own login account on the machine that you're sharing them with, then when they go into their account, it opens up their Gmail and their classroom and their everything else, and then their stuff is separated. I know I got added in as a parent to one of my kids' classrooms, and the teacher messed it up, and I keep getting assignments, and which I don't intend to turn in. So yeah, just even like that. So because we have separate accounts, she gets her assignments, she turns them in, I get versions of the same assignment. But if we were sharing the same machine and I deleted the assignment, I could accidentally delete hers. So just again, trying to ensure separation, physical separation when possible, but digital separation by accounts if you can.
Amazing. Okay. And then one of the other things that's getting talked about a lot, both, within this aspect of what technology schools are using to connect, and then how everybody else is living through this period right now, is around Zoom calls. And so many people are using it. Governments I've been on lots of government Zoom calls. Some schools are using it, but then there's this other kind of group or other narrative around the safety and security of Zoom. So talk about that, because we're using it for school, we're using it for play dates, for cocktail parties, like you name it.
So Zoom is like, I always go back to my knife analogy. Like a kitchen knife is innately dangerous, but if you know how to use it safely, it's a really great tool. So the real crux with Zoom is that they've had these issues for a long time and they didn't fix them. That's the big complaint with Zoom. But they are fixing them now. So the reason why Zoom has been deemed dangerous is because if you don't have a password protection on it, anyone can walk in. So if I throw a party and I post invitations all over the city and I have no bouncer at the door taking names, anyone can walk into my party and do whatever they want. Zoom is the same way. If you set a password, then you are preventing people without that password from getting in. If you want, you can set a waiting room. And in that waiting room, you have to actually grant access to each person to come in. So that's a great way, especially with play dates. And if you're setting that for kids, to send that link out to, depending on the age, either the kids themselves or the parents, and say, if you're hosting this, only let in the 3 people that you know are coming in. It gets more difficult to control in larger situations, because then you know, if you're hosting something like a big event, the bigger issue I'm having with Zoom right now is the religious events that are using Zoom. And so that's, again, from a social engineering perspective as a hacker. Basically, anyone who was having Zoom calls on Wednesday or Thursday night of a few weeks ago was probably a Jewish family celebrating a Seder. So now I've tagged their religion, I've tagged their relatives. Then Sunday night, probably Easter, because those are not meetings that are happening on a Sunday night, right? So now I've tagged that. Ramadan's happening right now. So I get more concerned when families use it, because you're identifying yourself as something that someone could use, and now you're going to get an email from that religious institute saying, hey, we're collecting money for COVID-19 victims, and you're going to let your guard down because they have a piece of information about you that where did they get that from? So again, you can use it safely. Don't put your full name on it unless you need to, and please stop taking screenshots of your Zoom calls. Posting them online every day on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I'm like, great, now I know what 10 of your coworkers look like. I have their first and last name. I could send you 100 phishing emails from all of these people. You know, I could send you something from Joe Smith that says, hi, I talked to Barb Smith and she said that she gave you this information. And now, of course, I know too much information about your company, or your home, again, or your family. So if we could, I know I love it. I love the connection.
This is how I always feel whenever you talk at anything. I'm like this.
Yeah.
Like literally.
I know. And I see it and I cringe, because I'm like,
over here.
I see you reaching out for connection and I hear you, but please stop. It's too much, especially publicly.
So with that, just on that, because this is such a big thing, is there, what is your recommended video conference tool? Not necessarily for business, because we're right now talking about kids at home, but if kids do want to talk to
you know what? I do use Zoom, but I turn the video off.
Use what?
Why do you need the video to stream? I do use Zoom, but it depends on what it is. So if it's just one family member to another, like my kids will just use the native messaging that's in their, like if they're on an iPad, they'll use iMessage, right? So FaceTime is a much better way to go one-to-one. I have set up Zoom, but again, I don't publicize it. I set a password on it. It's not, again, Zoom is not evil. It's just the way you're sharing it and using it. So if you want to use it for your family, use it. Set the password, set the waiting room, use it. Just don't share these photos with people's faces and full names over and over and over again on other social media accounts.
That's everywhere.
Like, have the moment.
Okay. So talking about the different softwares that schools are using, and it's all over the map, even within a school. My daughters, both of their teachers are using different pieces of software to connect. And, you know, you and I were talking a little bit earlier this week about these stories of seeing teachers with all good intention, but, you know, trying to get their students to be creative and to do different activities, and asking them to create media. So asking them to do videos, whether on, and then posting them on YouTube. Well, getting the kid to post it on YouTube, or doing a TikTok, for example, and submitting that. So this is a loaded question, obviously. So there's a piece around how, well, let's just focus on that last piece. So this issue of teachers potentially suggesting or asking kids to be using social media platforms that have an age limit or an age restriction. Yeah. So just talk generally about that, and age restrictions generally, and the pressure that parents, and we hear this all the time, like, you know, if I'm watching my child's, if I'm supervising, is it okay that my 11-year-old has an Instagram account? Is it okay that they're using TikTok just to, you know, to play and create videos for themselves? If I'm very careful with the and we'll talk about TikTok more in because that's a big separate thing.
TikTok's its own entity right now. Okay, so there is the only regulation for children right now in North America is called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. and that it's an American legislation, but these are mostly American apps, so we fall under this. Essentially what it says is that for children under 13, their data cannot be sold and cannot be collected individually. And because of that, social networks were like, I can't make money off of you, I don't want you on the network. And that is why the minimum age to almost all of these networks is 13. Right? It's not because they're altruistically saying, oh, let's protect the kids. They're saying we can't make money off of you. We don't want you here. Okay. So that's the original one. So there are versions like Facebook for kids, right? Like Facebook Kids yes. Messenger doesn't collect the data. To me, it's a gateway drug. They're just trying to get you hooked on Facebook so that they can bring you in. But so legally, none of these kids are supposed to be on before they're 13, legally. When I go into grade 5, 6 classes, none of whom are 13, and I ask how many people have an Insta account, a Snapchat, or whatever, all of them put up their hands. These kids always have at least one something, right? They're on something. So we know they're on there. That's fine. But because it's a legal thing, no school could ever ask you to have to create an account on any of these because legally they can't. It's like saying we're gonna have to drive over at 14 years old. You right. can't do it. And I talked to a lot of school boards on this in the past few weeks, and they have a mandated list of acceptable software that the teachers are giving out. Google certainly is one of them. Coode is one of them. I've seen Epic reading like, the names are all ridiculous and they sound like alien planets, but there's a bunch of these tools. They shouldn't include social media for anyone under 13 because you can't obligate any of these kids to get an account. One of the misconceptions is that on the Apple App Store, when you go to download, their thing says 12 plus. So kids will say, oh, it's a 12 plus rating, not 13. Apple will let you download it at 12 plus, but the actual app rating is like, it's still 13 years old by that. So are kids on these things? Again, they are. But my bigger concern with parents, if you're trying to monitor your children, it's not what they're posting, it's what they're consuming. So I hear that a lot. I share an Instagram account with my kid. They're only posting pictures of my cat. And I'm like, okay, so you can see the pictures they're posting, but then your child is taking their device and they're spending hours combing through Instagram material. And there is unfortunately a lot of sexually related stuff, a lot of, and again, it depends on the level in your house of what's appropriate or inappropriate. But it's not banned by Instagram unless there's like actual full nudity in it, but you could be wearing a tiny string bikini or like a little thong and that's fine. So whatever these kids are picking up, I have seen oral sex on Twitter and I reported it and it disappeared immediately. I've seen it on Instagram too. So people stick it up there and then until someone reports it, it's right. there. So that's my bigger concern with these things. It's not an age, it's a maturity of your child. It's, will they come and tell you if they've seen something that made them uncomfortable? Will they come talk to you about what that is? Or are they gonna see it and then not tell you? One of the biggest things with kids is the reason they don't tell parents that they've seen something is because they think they will have their devices taken away. And so it's much better to pretend it never happened. So if you're like, if your children have that, if you come and you tell me, I'm not going to take it away, I just want to know if you're okay and how to solve the problem and we'll get through this, then they'll come tell you what they've seen on Absolutely. Those things. But yeah, so that's my bigger thing with all of those. And they all have privacy settings. I opened a Snapchat account to talk to my kid. I'm only connected to her. And yet I get a litany of other children's names that I can connect with who I don't know, who are popping up in my, hey, you should connect with this kid. So that's like, set the privacy settings. If you're going to do it, set the privacy settings. And set the privacy settings. And you brought up a really good point about that open conversation. So how do you start that? When do you start it? In terms of, making sure you have that open line of communication so that when something happens, because inevitably they're going to screw up at some point. We all do. I screw up, right. Online. So, when that happens, we want to make sure that we're there to support them and figure that out. So what are your top tips for having that kind of a dialogue in the house? Yeah. So like, to me, it's always like when we were 16 or 17 and our parents said to us, I don't want you to go drink, but if something happens, call me and I'll come get you. No questions asked. It's the same thing. The real thing is to get ahead of it. So I have a free contract you can download off my device. You can make your own, but on that contract, which I gave my kids when I gave them a device, it basically said, you know, you agree this, 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 and this, you know, like no devices at this time, no devices at the kitchen table, whatever your rules are in your house. I agree that if you come to me with something that you've seen, I'm not going to take your device away, right? Now, if they're the victim, they're being victimized twice then. Like if they come to you and say, I'm being bullied on Instagram, parents' first reaction is great, Instagram's gone then. But kids, especially the older kids, use Instagram sometimes as their only means of communication. That is their direct messaging. And so when you take that away, you're taking away their connection to all their friends. They're not going to tell you. So again, if they're being victimized, taking this away from them is not going to solve the problem. It's just going to make it worse. If they're the bully, it's a different story. So again, in that contract saying, you know, I expect you not to bully or harass or belittle other individuals online. And then when you see this stuff, again, I promise to learn about what you're doing and try and respect it. We don't have to understand it.
Right.
There's some YouTube channels I've looked at and gone, I don't get it, but we don't have to understand it, but we have to respect that's what they're doing. My favorite example was my daughter asked if she could watch the Endgame trailer when it came out. And I was like, sure. And before it was the trailer for Pet Cemetery. And that trailer was really creepy, like really creepy. And so here's a perfect example where she was actually going to watch something she had permission to watch, but ran into something that was really scary. So if I was the parent to take something away and she'd come to me and said, I saw the scary trailer, I'd be like, well, then you're not watching trailers on YouTube anymore. Forget it.
Which is
right?
like the first instinct for everything, right? It's just like, oh my God, okay.
It's just to take it away. So again, we don't have to understand, but we have to respect that this is their communication method. And in this whole thing with COVID, this is a brand new, like, this is the only way our kids have to communicate. Exactly. It's not even supplementing. They don't have real life communication right now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a lifeline for all of us. Right.
Yeah.
So we only have a little bit of time left, but I want to talk about TikTok because it's such a big it's such a big topic, and we're getting asked in our work about it all the time. And even as a parent, you know, my daughter had accessed it before I even knew what it was. I had to go inform myself, and then I was like, ooh, you know, no, we're not going to do that. But there are aspects to it that I love. I love how creative it is. I love the choreography. I love the dancing. I love the, like, for her anyway, it's a creative outlet that is enjoyable. I fully get why, you know, we've had the dark side of it too, which is why it was removed from devices. But just talk a little bit about TikTok and what's happening there.
Oh,
it's a big one.
So as someone who used to be a dancer, like, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is so cool. But okay, so here's the problem. It was Musical.ly, and Musical.ly was a North American app, and Musical.ly followed this whole COPPA thing, and they protected children. And then TikTok bought Musical.ly. TikTok is Chinese owned, and the way the Chinese government works is vastly different than the North American government, and they operate on collecting information. It's what they do. So the amount of information, like, people joke it's Chinese spyware. It really is Chinese spyware. Like, the amount of data it is collecting about your children, the location they're filming from, the people they're connecting to, who's watching their videos, it's enormous. And there's already been a couple articles that have been released in the United States from some of these hacking agencies saying, you know, here's how this data could be used against your kid. They could receive an email that looks like it's from a friend that has personal information in it because they've culled it from the TikTok. They've culled it from the connections in the videos. And again, the location, like, I know what city you're in. I know these 3 friends that you have. And so it's a lot of private information that's being given away through TikTok. So the concept is amazing, and that's the problem. The concept is amazing, and it is a creative outlet. But the actual information collection in there it's very disturbing, the amount of information there.
And can you lock that down in any way in the privacy settings, or no?
Yeah, like, you can have a private account and not share it, but most kids want people to see their videos. It's the whole point. And so it's the app itself is going to collect that data no matter what. So there's different levels of kind of criminal behavior, right? There's criminals that are going to take information that's publicly available, and there's criminals that are going to know how to access the information that's being collected. So are you cutting out a lot of people if you just don't publicly? It's the same thing as having a public YouTube channel or a private YouTube channel. Right? The public YouTube channel is going to give away a lot of information to the whole world, private YouTube channel, you are only giving it away to some people. But YouTube itself Google is collecting your data for their own purposes. TikTok is doing, I don't know what with it. Like I'd be very hesitant, and as much as, and I hate it because it is fun. It is the coolest idea. But it is a massive privacy side.
And you know what the point that I take from that is just the critical importance of the literacy piece. So it's not just, and many of us don't understand why it's an issue. So we'll say, okay, no, you know, because China's spying on you, and kids don't understand. Like that is so
it's so ridiculous.
Unrelatable to a child. Of why would that even matter to me? So
I don't know a single 16-year-old that would be like, oh no.
I know.
They'd all be like, whatever.
But when you explain it with the example that you explained it with, to say like, this is how they could then take your information and take advantage of you, or, you know, you could be exploited in some way, and that's why it's dangerous. It's that next piece of understanding how that data can then be used inappropriately against them, which is, I think, the missing piece, and the piece that we're trying to kind of educate kids and parents about, is like, what, you know, so what is the so what, and why is that important to understand? And the more they understand data usage, you know, the better equipped they'll be.
A great quick example that people can relate to was when Disney Plus came out in November. There was this rumor that they had been hacked because 30% of accounts had been hacked into, or 20%, whatever it was. Disney didn't get hacked. What happened was there was a breach of Yahoo like years ago, where people had used an email password combination, and then hackers have held on to those lists. So when people created their Disney Plus accounts, they just fired those lists off to see if people were reusing passwords, and they were. So any account that they could get into, they took over and changed the password on, and then it was their account. So that's a great example where it blows back in the company's face. It makes it look like it's their problem, but it was actually an individual problem. Right? We as individuals don't change passwords, then that's what's going to happen, is people are going to collect them and come back at you. So yeah, the little things like that.
The password piece is so critical. The teacher sending passwords that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then saying like, don't worry, you know, just tell them to go and change it. Okay. So is there anything else right now that you can give in terms of tips for parents who are concerned about the amount of screen time that their kids are having right now being increased, where they're not at school, they're not doing their activities, and some of them are spending more time online? Is that, you know, can they just relax a little bit about that, as long as they're paying attention to privacy and security? And, you know, what do you tell parents who are worried about that?
So I did a lot of research on this a few years ago, because I always got that question, and I'm like, I'm a tech person. So I went to the eye doctors, I went to the psychology people, right? I think it really depends. For me, because my kids are on iPads and they're so close to that screen, I tell them that if they want digital time outside of school time, I'd much rather them flip Netflix on the TV, or they can mirror YouTube up to the TV, is a lot better than having this little close screen to eyeballs. And then I'm not doing a good job right now because I'm holding my phone. I should be sitting up straight. Like when I watch my kids and they like, you know, their backs start to fold and their necks go forward. Like, to me, it's more of a physical thing as opposed to a privacy thing. There is a lot, and you have to know your own kid. There's a lot of psychological issues. I mean, like watching Trump talk about inhaling Lysol has just made my whole day miserable, because, right? Like, so there's a lot of that. So understanding where your kids are, Snapchat has Snap stories from people from all over the world, like, and you can watch that. And so whose stories are they consuming? Whose Instagram channels are they following? A lot of kids are in Discord. Who are they talking to? Discord allows you to talk while you're doing gaming and things like that. Like who is giving them information? So again, it's not the digital stuff. We've got to like say this is a weird, unprecedented time and there's nothing we can do, but it's knowing who they're communicating with. And again, understanding your child. Like there are responsible, mature 11-year-olds, and then there are 17-year-olds that need a lot of supervision. So well, knowing your child and
even for adults, right? That this is something that, you know, you see often, like adults talking about, is like, wow, you know, I've really just become aware of how what I'm watching and consuming is impacting my own mental health. And we're all doing this right now, right? You know, if things are, you know, you fill up your feed with things that are just making you feel like crap every day because you're not working out twice a day and, you know, doing all the things that you're watching other people do. It's the same for kids. And I think people often, my experience is that parents don't often realize that the same things they're experiencing with the consumption of online content is exactly what's happening with their kids, right? So a lesson there. And, you know, there was a big conversation in our house this morning about science literacy. And like, I've tried to explain that, you know, I have younger kids, you know, what is that? And so the example of what's happening in the US with, you know, a suggestion that you could inject, a cleaning product into yourself, and why, you know, their initial comment was like, well, everyone knows you can't do that. I'm like, no, actually, this is what happens when people don't have basic science literacy, is that they believe the people who are in leadership positions, right? So whether that is the president of the United States, whether that is a celebrity, whether that is a teacher, it's that literacy piece that's so critical, and getting kids to understand how important, I mean, there's just like the importance of science and tech literacy has like literally never been more
I know.
It's never been more critical as
yeah. And also to what you're saying too, the mom guilt right now that I hear from my friends is I know I'm supposed to pick up a hobby, but I don't even have time to work and take care of my kids. Or I'm like, who said you had to pick up a hobby except for a Facebook meme that went by last week? Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do this well. You don't have to balance things properly. Like, I know people can't get their kids off their screens.
We're having a little connectivity issue there. Oh. You're breaking up a bit. I don't know if it's
there. I think I lost you for a second.
Oh yeah, there you go. No, but that message that you're saying is so important. And I've been talking a lot in the media over the past 6 weeks, just about, you know, what kinds of activities parents could do at home in terms of science and technology. And I always make sure, I mean, the two messages that I try to convey before I even get to those tips and suggestions is, one, like, this is an iterative process that no one knows how to work from home and homeschool and deal with trauma at the same time. Like, this is not something that anyone just wakes up and is an expert at. And, you know, the second piece is you mentioned it off the top, is just a recognition of the, you know, the inequities that do also exist. And I want us all to keep, especially people that work in this field, like, I just want us to be so aware of, you know, the fact that this is a privileged conversation, right? Of like, okay, my kid has access to 3 different devices and all of these apps, and I'm working, and, you know, and so recognizing what's happening with kids who either don't have access to that technology, which is critical for learning and social connection right now, and how we just bring attention and voice and stuff to that, and that there are different safety issues, not different, additional safety issues at play there as well.
And even with my own kids, I've asked them, because of the hours that they're in school, I've asked them to turn their cameras off, because my husband and I are also in meetings and it pulls the bandwidth down. So I said, you know, if you need to, and the teachers are sitting there going, everyone put your camera on so I can see you. And so my younger one had to message back and said, my mom's asked me not to. But I do appreciate the feedback. Like when you are teaching, because I've done virtual seminars, and not having the audience feedback is hard. So I understand why the teachers like the face-to-face, but not every household has the ability to do that. And so asking instead of demanding, I think is a thing we need to start doing. If you can, please do this, as opposed to make sure you do it this way, because not everyone can. Not everyone has a printer to print a page off, right?
And we're all learning. I laughed, and we'll kind of end. We have to wrap up, but we had this issue where I was getting some messages, you know, about not only about reminding children about, you know, online safety and online behaviors, but also like, hey, and a note to parents, like, please be clothed in the backgrounds of the kids' videos, which I thought was just like, I mean, it's funny but not funny, but it's still, we're not aware that basically there, you know, for those of us who have devices in the house, there's always a video on somewhere.
Yes, and I got reprimanded by my daughter that I swore in the background.
Right. Well, there you go. Right. It's
people can hear you.
Well, this has been such a great,
Yeah, sorry.
great conversation. As always, I so appreciate your expertise and your experience and the way that you're able to deliver it in such a concrete way that is like, gets us to think, but also gives us the kind of actions to take. So thank you very much. And I think
You're welcome.
we're going to be doing more of these live videos, and I hope that you'll come back and talk to us again in a few weeks. Yeah.
That would be great.
Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Bye.